I took a look at a Red Wing move and I said, all right, Dylan Cousins, right? From Buffalo, he's a player that seems to be available, a once 30-goal scorer. He's still young. He can be a power play factor. And, he seems to be out there as an option, a guy that went, did he go right after the Red Wings took Mo Seider? I think it was right the next pick. And I remember him being discussed at the time, and earlier in his career, he was more productive than he is now, but maybe in Detroit, and to add to some scoring depth. But then you blew my doors off, and I went, all right, is this actually realistic?
So I brought up the name Connor McDavid. And I know right away people are saying that's just stupid, that's foolish, there's no way that's going to happen. And okay, once you get past that, then start to do a little digging and see, are you sure about that? He's a free agent after next season. And he makes a ton of money, right? He makes $12.5 million a year. And he's not the highest paid player on his team. That's Leon Draisaitl, who is signed for a long time. He's many years left in his contract. So can Edmonton afford to re-sign him? I think that they try to find every way possible because they don't want to lose a guy that's been there for 10 years and is the star of the league. However, the star of the league hasn't won a Stanley Cup. And not that the Red Wings are ready-made to win the Cup, but maybe a change of scenery might do them some good. And coming to a team that is younger and up-and-coming here, as opposed to being this top-heavy team that they have in Edmonton, maybe that has some appeal. The salary cap will go up significantly each of the next few years in the NHL. It goes up for everybody, but it goes up for the Red Wings, and because they're part of the league. They have some cap space. They'll have players coming off of contracts, and more importantly, they're going to have players coming into the roster that will be really young players that won't cost them much of anything because they're going to be draft picks they've had for the last few years and are finally going to get to see the light of day here on a regular basis with this team. So could they afford him? Yeah, I think they can afford him as we look towards the future of this whole thing.
Okay, so look, I'm this feels a little pipe dreamy fantasy, but on the surface, if he does get to free agency, right now the Red Wings going into the 26-27 season have the 8th most cap space in the league. They only have 7 players under contract, but as you mentioned, they could have a roster filled with young players that don't cost anything. Mm-hmm. The teams ahead of them in terms of cap space, there are places that seem like it would be unlikely he would end up. I don't think he'd end up in San Jose. I don't think he'd end up in Anaheim. I could see him going to Chicago. I could see him going to Dallas. I could see him going to Pittsburgh. In terms of teams, those teams all have more cap space. There's so much highway between now and then in terms of, okay, what players do you sign this offseason? What players do you trade for? What players do you have to re-up? Feels like the Red Wings have already re-upped 2 young players that kind of commanded big salaries. Is there any way Edmonton lets him get to free agency?
Edmonton could trade him.
What would compel them to trade him?
Because they know they can't sign him. If they can't sign him, you have to trade him or risk losing him for nothing. And that's not what Edmonton has done historically.
Right now, they have one of the best teams in hockey. They're not going to trade him this year. Next year would be the last year he's under contract. It would, you know what a requirement would be? A requirement would be that they would have to take a dramatic step backwards.
Well, not winning the cup could get frustrating. There's a lot of pressure on them to do so. A lot of pressure on Connor McDavid to deliver because he is the best player in the league. And they got a whiff of the Stanley Cup finally last season, but they didn't win it. They lost to a team in Florida, which has to be heartbreaking for them. And I don't know what's going on in Connor McDavid's head. If he's frustrated about it, if he wants out, we'll see. But it's
just I can't. The things that would have to happen, the dominoes that would have to line up to a path to get him, they're unpredictable right now. It would take a collapse from Edmonton. It would take a player that wants out, that's sick of it. And it would take an organization that is backed into a corner.
Greatest player in NHL history was traded from Edmonton after they won a Stanley Cup.
Yep. And the Luka trade has allowed us to sort of, it's kind of licensed us to talk about crazy crap. Even if it does seem unlikely, hell, whoever imagined Luka would get traded. There was an NBA player, I think it was Pascal Siakam, who recently was asked about his level of what his commitment is, and he's like, "Look, man, anything can happen now. The wheels, the lug nuts have been loosened on every possible trade." Do I think this is possible? Probably not, but they would be one of the teams that'd be prepared to make a move. Now all we need is for an epic collapse, and we need
infighting. We need infighting.
We need disgruntlement. We need to bring in disgruntlement.